It's ready to go, yes. So Concha, if you want to get the meeting started, you could, or we could wait for Stern to join us. It's up to you.
Well, what would you prefer? I don't mind waiting another moment for him.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to give him time to find the link and get joined.
And he's actually joining right now. Hello. Great timing.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so we are ready to get started.
Well, okay, let's begin our meeting. Today's meeting will begin now, and the time is 3:04. And Ms. Neubauer, if you can please do roll call.
Mrs. Concha Dunwell, Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Here.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
I'm here.
Mr. Francis Vigil. I will record him as Commissioner absent. Dr. Ronald Stern.
Hello.
And Mr. John Hooper.
Present.
And Commissioner Vigil is joining the meeting right now.
So we have no absent commissioners. Everyone is present here today, correct? And who are additional participants today?
We will have, we expect Delilah Tenorio, our Assistant Attorney General. We have Jessica Eubank, Andrea Ginn, Rochelle Clifford, and Gabriella Cravens as interpreters, Nathan Gomes, Executive Director, Corina Gutierrez, Director of Community Advocacy, Lisa Dignan, Director of Community Engagement, Deborah Romero, CFO and Director of Administrative Services, Jessica Eubank, Community Development Specialist, and Lori Neubauer, Administrative Operations Specialist.
All right, let the record show everyone is here in attendance today. The commissioners had a meeting through Zoom. We would like to request, during this meeting through Zoom, would like to request that everyone mute their microphones. That will eliminate background noise and distractions during the board meeting. Thank you. And if any of the commissioners do prefer to speak, feel free to unmute yourselves to allow for that. Also, there will be voting happening. And again, you can choose to speak during that election process as well. If you would like to speak, Please identify yourself by stating your name prior to making your comment. Any action items or decisions are made through a vote. Discussions related to the agenda may be suspended and no commission actions will be taken in the event that the proceedings need to be paused. And that will occur if there are any technical issues that come up today, problems with audio or video connections. Staff members, please do leave your cameras off. We will call on you when it is your time to present, and then you can turn your cameras on. Today, we all had an opportunity to review the prior meeting's minutes. Has everyone done that? Seeing a lot of
Yes.
yeses. All right. Would anyone like to move to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
We need to approve the agenda first. This is Executive Director Gom.
Oh, okay. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I see John Hooper.
Okay. I, John Hooper, move to approve the agenda as it is.
All right. Do we have a second?
Commissioner V. Hill seconds.
Any further discussion? Okay. All right, and we may go through another roll call to take votes. Thank you.
Mrs. Concha Dunwell, Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Yes.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Francis Vigil,
Yes.
Mr. John Hooper,
Yes.
and Dr. Ronald Stern.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Moving to our next item. We need to approve the minutes from our previous board meeting. Our previous meeting occurred on September 10th. Have everyone had an opportunity to review the meetings from the September 10th, the minutes from the September 10th meeting? Okay, I see yeses. Any corrections? Is there any changes, corrections, or additions? No? Okay. I will be accepting motions to approve the September 10th minutes.
I'll move approval. This is Mike O'Brien.
This is Commissioner Vigil, seconds. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Neubauer, would you please take roll call vote?
Mrs. Concha Dunwell,
Yes.
Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Yes.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Francis Vigil,
Yes.
Mr. John Hooper,
John Hooper, yes.
and Dr. Ronald Stern.
I abstain because I was not in attendance at that meeting. Okay, and that motion still carries, correct? Yes, okay. All right, thank you all. Moving on to our reports. First, Director Gum.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking the time to come today for this meeting. Commissioners, as you know, we are still facing issues with the pandemic. There have been multiple challenges, and hopefully you've had the opportunity to review our report that expands on several of those issues. Dr. Stern?
Is there any way we can spotlight you so we can see you in a full view? Because the interpreter is speaking, we wouldn't need to see the interpreter. Would that be all right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Ms. Dignan is running the technical aspect of this meeting, so she should be able to fix that.
If it's not too much trouble, thank you. And this is Lisa Dignan. I apologize if I do spotlight Nathan. It will alter our live stream. This is Dr. Stern. Currently, the spotlight is on Andrea, but it doesn't make quite so much sense, but the director is a smaller space, but that is all right. You do have permission to pin. So within your own personal view, you should be able to pin. This is Dr. Stern. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Got it. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Nice. Had a little trick to get it done. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Stigman. So I would like to talk about some of the issues that we have faced in the first quarter and that we are currently seeing happen. I will let you board members know that I myself am currently recovering from COVID. I was tested positive. And this is not an insignificant illness. It has had a great impact and has made me be very thoughtful of our community and their needs. We have tried to address many different issues, including access to medical services, vaccinations, access to information from the governor's office, the Department of Health, Health and Human Services, and a lot of this thought has been related to rural New Mexico specifically. We know that broadband issues happen. It's very limited in rural New Mexico. We do not have complete coverage in the state. Some areas are very lucky to have hotspots, but those are expensive. they have satellite options as well. And there are limits on internet speed. If you try to get internet services through Verizon, it may not work in some areas of New Mexico. So individuals can't choose one carrier. They may need to use Verizon or Sprint or T-Mobile. And that has had a big impact on education, medical services, access to information, access to food, registration forms. Some communities in New Mexico have done a fantastic job of developing local resources. Albuquerque is a great example. They have the hotspot bus that travels around the city. But there's still a serious lack of resources. We've had conversations with AARP and a variety of stakeholders to see what it is that we can do to promote 100% access in the state. Currently, we will be meeting with some stakeholders very soon, this month before January, to have a discussion about these concerns and what we can do to provide internet access in those rural areas. Now, I will say this is not a unique situation to New Mexico. I've been in meetings with several people from other states who are experiencing similar barriers, where access has not been successful. With the current pandemic and social distancing, the inability to access some areas, it's been a great challenge. There have been other issues that we need to address as well, such as web access, so that people can use different platforms such as Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. And not all of those platforms have equal access for deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind consumers. We've been working on a national level
We're working to develop white papers
that will
that
be
will cover
distributed
all the states. Mhm.
not only to New Mexico. And these papers are to make sure that we are all using the best possible platform, because they are not all equal. Some do not allow you to access the interpreter very well. Others do not have very good captioning. For the state of New Mexico, we have seen some effective changes. As more and more organizations and individuals use the Zoom platform, in January, there will be a legislative session that will be held using Zoom, which will allow for deaf, deafblind, and those with visual impairments to access this legislative session more effectively. They will also have captioning for all of the legislative processes. And we've already put in a request for interpreters for those legislative processes as well. So if you go to the legislative website right now on the home page, you will see an option to request an interpreter or request accommodations for the legislative session. And that's a step, but it does not solve all of the issues that we have, especially not those with internet access issues. But we have seen some slow changes and improvement in that. I would like to talk about vaccinations as well. That's a hot topic right now. And Dr. Stern, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a question. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I learned that Zoom will be providing interpreters if you make a request for any Zoom meeting. Is there any truth to that? Have you heard any of rumors to that effect?
Commissioner Stern, to answer your question, VRS video relay services can be used through Zoom, so you can use a relay interpreter for Zoom. I will be talking about relay in my report very soon. So
Okay.
if you don't mind, I'd like to hold that question for now.
Absolutely, whatever's best for you.
Thank you. So right now I'd like to talk about vaccination. We have already spoken with the Department of Health and encouraged them to add interpreters and support service providers to their list of priority individuals for the vaccine. That vaccine process is a multi-step process. And there are many tiers in that priority list, such as first responders, healthcare workers, and other individuals. We've encouraged them to add interpreters and SSPs who provide services to deafblind individuals or deaf individuals in the hospital who are themselves experiencing symptoms of COVID, so that those interpreters and SSPs are safe as well. So we've asked them to consider adding both interpreters and support service providers to the list, personal care providers as well, not only for those who are deaf, but for those who may have a vision loss, for those with developmental disabilities, and so forth. We want to make sure that their support providers are safe as well, and that they have a priority access to the vaccine. Now, this is not a simple process. There's a lot of moving parts. We had originally thought that there would be 50,000 doses. However, we recently discovered that there's been a reduction in that number for the state of New Mexico. So how we decide how to allocate those vaccines is an ongoing discussion. There was a discussion this morning as well, and we don't yet have the results of those discussions, but we are working on it to be sure that deaf and deafblind individuals are able to work with their support service providers, and that support service providers will not be exposing or transmitting COVID back and forth. And it's a challenge because there is a limited number of doses, and it takes time to set up that vaccine, because that vaccine also has 2 different doses that must be taken. You do the first dose, and then you wait 21 days and have a second dose delivered. There's also the issue of whether or not the vaccine will be successful. There's also reporting concerns. So this is something that we continue to work on. Dr. Stern?
So I have a question regarding COVID, if that's a good time now.
Go ahead.
I am very impressed with your website and all the vlogs that you've done about COVID, and with the vaccination situation today. And I'm wondering if you will post something about vaccines and what they can do or cannot do. I think our community needs accurate information, and there's so much confusion and misinformation within the community right now. I'm wondering if you plan to convey that type of information to the community, specifically in-depth, detailed information about vaccination.
The answer is yes. We are working on that.
Great.
Yesterday, I was in a meeting with a company called Ready Op. And this company creates a volunteer registration form for the website. So I did have a conversation with them about making sure that there was an ASL interpretation of the questions on that form, so that individuals who are filling out this form are able to see the questions in ASL. We also discussed access issues for individuals who are blind or deafblind and use a Braille reader. You may have experienced yourself issues with CAPTCHA before. For a security website where you have to try to figure out what certain letters and numbers are. And that's been an issue before for Braille readers. So yesterday we did have a conversation about that and making sure that the vaccination form and the process and all of that information is accessible as well.
You've all seen Roger Robb and all of the vlogs that he's been posting. You see his face frequently, and he's absolutely involved in this project as well. So people have been joking that his name isn't even Roger Robb anymore. It's Roger Spielberg because of how often he's engaged in making these videos for us.
And he will also be making vlogs about the vaccination process as well, talking about Pfizer and Moderna and the differences between those. We've been working with them for a few weeks now. We're working on a partnership with the Access and Functional Needs Group and several different organizations and agencies. Does that answer your question, Dr. Stern?
It does. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Now I would like to go back to Relay, which you had made a point of before. Some of you may have seen that video relay service companies are traditionally used for those interpreter services, and now are being used for meetings such as Zoom and through WebEx. We have been encouraging these companies not to allow that people need to hire interpreters for these meetings that have the background, who have the information. And I'd like to share a little bit about why that is. Recently, there was a situation where a court did use a video relay service interpreter for their proceedings. And that was not successful, and it was not how that should have been handled. We did let the National Association for the Deaf and the FCC know what had happened and that VRS interpreters should not be used in those situations. We know that they've also been used for education, for legal proceedings, for mental health appointments. And VRS is a good service, yes, but if they're being used for meetings that are 3 or 4 hours long, it limits the availability of those relay interpreters. So we're encouraging these companies and these businesses to provide their own interpreters for these meetings. We know that hospitals are hiring staff interpreters as well. We've had a few more who have been hired for hospitals here. And we've seen success with that. Another reason that we are trying to make sure that VRS interpreters are not used is because relay services become overwhelmed. And our relay numbers have increased by 60% here in the state of New Mexico. And our TRS fund pays for that. So it's a big challenge that we're facing right now. We don't want this issue to continue. You can use VRS for these meetings, you can. The FCC does permit that. However, we can have concerns about how they're being utilized at the moment. With that, I open to commissioners if you have any questions for me. Chair Dunwell?
The chair recognizes myself. I had heard this morning, just recently on the news, that the FCC is providing funding, almost $2 billion for SpaceX. To set up the satellite internet services. So that rural areas could have increased internet accessibility. So I read that and I was really stunned. I think that's very cool. And I'm hopeful that that process will move forward, but I'm not sure if that's really a solution for the problem that we have. It may be a lengthy process, and that's not going to just happen quickly. But right now, that does provide us with some hope that potentially they will be developing something. Of course, there may be other needs for equipment and things that are required at that time, more Wi-Fi, more internet access, whatever may be there. But I think that I find that very interesting. And I'm thinking surely here in America is not the only country that's suffering with limited resources, especially when it comes to internet access. Do you think this is a positive step?
I think any expansion of internet services is a positive step, but something that we need to keep in mind is the cost of those internet services. Most of us use a high level of speed, a high level of internet usage for involvement in these meetings for video phones, and there is a cap on internet services right now. Now, we've never reached that cap, but as people are using more and more internet services, we get closer to it. And it's a real challenge for those who have low income and in those rural areas. So if more satellites were created, it would be fantastic, but we don't know what the cost will be yet. And we don't know what the equipment needs will be and what the total impact of that is. So this is a serious discussion because internet services are not considered a utility. So it's a challenge for those who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing who use technology for access. They then have to pay more for the right to have successful communication. So this is an ongoing discussion that we've had with the FCC and at the federal level as well. We're trying to address these issues because there is a serious lack of funds and access. There is the Lifeline program that we do have, but it has a cap as well for how much data someone can use. And someone who is deaf will go over that limit very quickly using their video phone alone. Right now, trying to use the internet for work and for meetings has increased the need, and it's an ongoing issue. We do need to do better in addressing those issues here in New Mexico, yes, but also at the federal level as well.
So as I was reading this article, I was thinking this is just so awesome because for myself as a user of, cable-based internet services, there's always glitching that happens here. And of course, I do live in a rural area and I am in the southern part of New Mexico. So with that, I always experience difficulties with internet connectivity. But I've also realized that the deaf community here in Las Cruces who use video relay services to connect with friends and family or to whatever they need to connect with still struggle because most of the areas here can rely on a cable connection. And I felt like that was a positive thing that gives me hope. And with the FC's support, I need their financial support, the amount of money they're willing to pledge to this, I think is a positive step.
Yes. Dr. Stern? Dr. Gallegos?
Okay. Chair Dunwell, commissioners, Director Gum. I'm wondering if there is any discussion about the interpreter access being provided or not provided for the governor's press conferences.
I sent an email recently to the governor's office. The governor herself has transitioned to a remote location for those press conferences. And there is a challenge with some of that technology in being able to show the governor speaking and an interpreter simultaneously via Zoom, as well as the live stream link to Facebook. So currently, Dr. Stern had asked me about the spotlighting and everything at the beginning. That changes what the live stream looks like on YouTube and Facebook. So we have a limited capability to make those changes for everyone to be able to see what is happening for the public who's tuning in. That same challenge applies to the governor's office. They're using Zoom for those press conferences and have individuals call in. We have provided several solutions. The first we offered was to change the video to a PowerPoint, so that it would be a static PowerPoint image. And the governor's office said that there were videos in the PowerPoint itself, so a static image would not work. So then we offered another solution called StreamYard that would allow an individual to pull from the Zoom directly to Facebook, a clip directly to Facebook, using a third-party app. There is a cost that is involved with that, and the governor's office told me that they found a way to get around that through OBS Studio. It's a studio software. And that software that allows you to do that pulling from one stream onto Facebook was going to be an issue because there was in-depth technology issues. I'm going to keep it simple here and not go completely in-depth into what the technology issues were. I know that people have said that I tend to go on and on when it comes to technology, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone in this discussion. So basically, that process would allow for a video on Facebook to be added so that an interpreter would be added to the video on Facebook through a third-party system. They have not yet responded to that. So I was in discussion with another agency to see what they could suggest to address this. So we do expect that there will be an interpreter provided on the governor's press conference soon. And the reason that we want that interpreter to be simultaneously included in that broadcast rather than adding an interpretation later or separately is simply that the internet connection access is not there for everyone. The press conference is on TV, so we need to have the interpreter there. Also, forcing the deaf community to wait to find out information is not okay. They would need to wait, and it does take time. Here in Albuquerque, with the public health order closing different businesses, recently at Thanksgiving, food had been sold out at grocery stores within an hour. A lot of products were no longer available. And so to ask the deaf community to wait to find out information like that is not acceptable. So we are asking them to have interpreters simultaneously involved in those press conferencing. We do have an email that has been sent out, and we will have follow-up with other individuals as well.
Okay. Chair Dunwell here. I recognize myself. Anyway, this is a related topic to the governor's press conferences, but I have been wondering, as a hard of hearing individual, and my husband is also hard of hearing, the captioning services are horrific. And the words may be jumbled, or you'll see the repetition of one single character and not clear words. And I understand that we have some legislation and some requirements for interpreters here, but what is the situation with captioning and regulation of that? Because I know that you all are wonderful at adding captions, and my husband has commented as well that the captioning services the commission utilizes are amazing, but not all captioning services are equal. And so it creates a problem for those who are deaf or hard of hearing, who rely on that for access and miss large chunks of what's being communicated. That's also an inequality issue that we face.
So I really see two parts in this discussion. I do want to recognize
Commissioner Vigil has raised his hand, so we will get to you in one moment. Is that question relevant to the current topic, or?
No, my question is different. Internet.
We're having some technical difficulties with the interpreters. I'm going to make sure everyone is able to see. Can you see the executive director all right?
So with that captioning, really I see two issues. For the
vaccine
TV
food.
for the TV captioning, that is an FCC issue.
I see.
So we need to discuss that with the FCC to improve captioning that way. Now, the FCC has not taken the steps needed to improve captioning on TV, especially in rural areas. So we do need to encourage them to take those steps. So that's one part of the discussion. The other is internet-based captioning. And it's like the Wild West, really. With different softwares, there's ASR, which is automatic speech recognition. And that software is not the same. Many have different uses. Google has their own software that is good for captioning. There's also Microsoft Teams, whose captioning is not reliable. You have rev.com for captioners as well, and that is also not a very good captioning service. We recently had discussions with IT individuals from Video Relay, from from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR. We had a conversation with them because there have been complaints about captioning provided through WebEx, which uses ASR. For our captioning, we use best practices, we use CART. And we encourage people to use those CART services because they really are the best for captioning. ASR can be tricky. They can be added for captioning. But if you're trying to use them for a conference or for something that's very important, they're not effective. So I'm currently working on something that I will be sending out to different state agencies that has already been sent out. That says we need to provide CART services, that they are the best service available. I will be presenting on December 21st with 3 other agencies, about best practices for web access. There are 80 registrants who are already ready to attend. And one of the topics we will be discussing is CART. We will be showing that it's the best captioning service available. And we encourage different agencies and entities to use CART. People sometimes think that if they just use that automatic speech recognition, it will solve the problem, but the truth is it does not.
Thank you very much.
Now, Commissioner Vigil, to your question.
I think it was more of a comment than it is a question. And so I think what we're all talking about in a large sense, in an overarching sense, and a lot of us, even in education fields, Dr. Gallegos is probably aware of this more than anybody, is digital divide that exists in many different aspects across not only in school-based education communication, but also within, of course, we're looking at it now through the deaf community. And that goes back to a lot of conversations with historically disenfranchised and marginalized groups that we really need to, and this is something I think a call to action. We keep talking about FCC, and I think it's time that there needs to be a really concerted effort, whether it be legislatively, whether it be through lobbying, to really start to put pressure on state and federal authorities to start to shift and to recognize some of these things, not only for in an educational setting that we're starting to see, but with groups like that are deaf, blind, hard of hearing. And those are some areas that really need to have we need to do a concerted effort there. I know that Mr. Gomes has had a conversation with me about some of the lobbying pieces and maybe some efforts of collaboration with other entities within New Mexico to start to look at how we can get funding, increased funding for some of these efforts. And of course, more importantly, for the immediacy of the need for internet service across the board for a lot of our students, for our families, but also for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. That is paramount right now, and I think it's come to the forefront. But I think, I guess the question I would have also would be, how can we start to utilize and leverage collaborative efforts through different entities such as PED and other state entities to really start to leverage and maximize this digital divide and bring it to the forefront in the next legislative session to start to look at lobbying efforts to really increase what we do and how we do it as far as delivery of these internet-based services. So, and I think the other part is even bringing in the utility component of this and making this a utility, not just in something that, oh, if you have enough money and you have access to it, then yeah. I think we've come to the point that this is a utility issue also. And I think this is something, I don't know if it's something that this body is able to, or how we can do that through this body. But I think it's something that we really need to, if it's through other mechanisms, how do we do that? So I don't know if that's a question, or I don't know if that's a statement, but I think it's a little bit of both. But I think as we go forward, it really needs to be in our purview as to how we start to move these issues forward.
Yes, I agree 100%, Commissioner Vigil. I have already started discussions with a variety of entities. Our Access and Functional Needs Group has frequent discussions about the need for access. And Dr. O'Brien often hears me talk about different issues that I see in rural communities that I do not feel are acceptable or right. And how we can improve this access for those communities, because a lot of those communities also have many individuals who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And that greatly adversely impacts their ability to access information in these communities. So yesterday we had a discussion with the National Association for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. It's a long one that I was doing here. The National Association of State Agencies for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. There were 38 of us who were in a discussion and who signed on. We signed this letter to, this has not yet happened, but we will be drafting a letter that talks about the reality of those internet services and that these communities are not receiving the services they need. And it's really unfortunate, especially in this pandemic, that they're facing that adversity. So we need to make this internet access a reality. I saw two hands. Dr. O'Brien?
Yeah, this is Mike O'Brien, and the whole issue of communication in rural communities affects students and people with disabilities at a higher level than anybody else, and in particular people who are poor. And we've got to find a way to resolve effective communications, and frankly, the internet communications is the answer to that question for almost all of the situations. And so access has got to be the issue. I think that the challenge has been that we've not been able to create the same taxes from landlines and move to cell phones And ultimately, that's got to be part of the argument about creating access is some equivalent tax percentage on cell phone usage that we once had on landlines that makes a technological difference to create communication. The bottom line is that as a result, we have inequitable services, inequitable education, inequitable opportunity, and the losses are not temporary losses. These are long-term losses. These are losses that third and fourth and fifth grade students, we will see them having losses as juniors and seniors in high school, and after that, we'll see them having losses as they try to go into technical school or into college because they'll be behind by that amount. And so as always, it's the community of people with disabilities that has to lead the way about access and demanding access, because if we can create it for the community of people with disabilities, in this particular case for people who are deaf or hard of hearing or deafblind, then it creates access for the other people as well. You know, I'm using closed captioning on my screen. I use closed captioning on my TV. I allege I have no hearing loss, but my bride would say otherwise, right? I say it's just so we can keep the TV quieter and not bother the neighbors, but I get advantage from it. And we sometimes have to cut the path and lead the way for others in order to make this work. And that may be our role as a commission, is to make that point and to advocate for access, but also to advocate for the resource. The issue here is that sort of we've seen the loss of resource, but it's been an invisible loss of resource to legislators and others who don't see it as an equivalent loss when it went from the landline to the cell phone in terms of communication. And frankly, maybe even with internet companies looking at a comparable accessibility tax or whatever is appropriate to assure that people's needs are met. And I'll get off my high horse now.
No, please continue. So yes, I agree that part of the issue is how much is available for those infrastructures when we don't know what that tax and rev number is going to be yet. But obviously it's not enough for the current need, and it is something that we need to address. Commissioner Stern?
Thank you, Nathan. Back to your comment about the multiple agencies signing on to make internet services a utility. And national organizations like NAD, are those on board with your efforts?
Yes. We have 3 national organizations, NAD,
TDI,
TDI, and HLAA. All 3 of those are on board.
thank you so much. That's great.
But I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mike O'Brien. It seems to me that we need others to sign on as well. National Rehabilitation Association, the Certified Rehabilitation Counselors Commission, the National Council on Disability on Rehabilitation Education. We need a substantive response from the entire community of people with disabilities. It affects all, even though it's specific to deafness. We need all of those communities to come forward and support that, because it then strengthens that kind of response. And frankly, we need to look at legislators at the national level that have historically supported disability related legislation, like Senator Murray from Washington, and even Senator Alexander to some extent out of Virginia as a Republican. We need to see that these individuals can, we've got to have multiple groups weigh in to make that become more powerful.
Yes, to get to that level, we will be involved with AARP. We're in discussions with them right now to get their perspective as well as CDD, the National Council on Disabilities. We've been working with them. We are working to build a coalition on the national and local levels to address this issue. It's not a simple issue. We've also been in discussion with Gallaudet and RIT, because we do feel that all of us are able to see these issues in the disability community at large. We're able to see what's going on. And right now, there's more of a standing. With this pandemic, we all have to stand together. It's been incredible. It's crucial that we have access to the internet as a utility. So I think right now, really the spotlight has been on a lot of us as we try to address this issue.
Chair Dunwell? Here again, I can't say enough. Thank you all so much for your tireless work and efforts. I know that you've been staying incredibly busy, and when we meet quarterly and hear about all of your comments, we are always adding more to your plate. So again, I want to express my gratitude to you and your staff for everything that you have done and have been doing, and you will continue to do. And for those of us in the future who will benefit from your work. With that, we'll move on to our next report.
Thank you, yes. If you had the opportunity to read the report, are there any questions for Corina and her section of the report? Dr. Stern?
I forgot that New Mexico VR has many different groups, one of them being MSD, SD. Oh, right. Okay, so the different categories of most significantly disabled, and all of that. That's new information that I gained today.
Yes, and I know that Dr. O'Brien commented on that with DVR in the past. That we still have OOS, Order of Selection. That is still in place currently. And in the report, you'll see what we are doing to address that for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, as well as DVR's response. DVR's report. And really, I think that this is still an issue that we're working to address throughout the state. Those who are deaf and hard of hearing aren't sure what the future holds right now for employment, for education, for a variety of different things in life with this pandemic ongoing. And as Dr. O'Brien stated, the impact on education in this process of online learning will be on term, will be long term. Not only for public education, but for higher education as well. And we don't have a good sense yet of what the future holds for these educational institutions, for people to have employment and receive job training through online means, working online as well. This is a whole new ballgame. So I think that DVR will continue to have, I believe, Dr. O'Brien, I don't know if you want to comment more on that, on what DVR is planning to do.
Sure.
For their town hall.
So this is Mike O'Brien, and we are having two public meetings, one on December the 18th at 10 o'clock and one on December the 22nd at 2 o'clock. And those will be Zoom-based meetings where we'll have closed captioning and interpreters present. The purpose of these meetings are to review our order of selection plan, and then to review changes that we've made in our manual of operating procedures following our federal evaluation or monitoring. There were a number of changes that they required us to make in several policy areas that we've rewritten. Although we did add a couple of our own. We made our computer policy, for example, more flexible to where the policy states it assumes if you're going to school, you need a computer, not that the school will provide it. So we've made a more flexible arrangement for that. Regarding order of selection obviously happens when either you don't have enough money or you don't have enough staff to serve all of the people that require services. Historically, for us, it has been a financial issue, but more recently, it has been both a financial issue and a staff issue, not having enough staff. Although we've been diligently trying to add staff this fall. We have taken 800, I think it's 884 people off of the wait list since June, and more than 1,400 people off of the wait list since a year ago this time. Last year at this time, there were 1,440 people on the wait list. Having taken off more than 1,400 people, there are still 860 people on the wait list. So even as we try to reduce it, it continues to grow. And we look to take another 250 people off in January. So we are continuously moving it. People in the most significant disability category don't ever go onto the wait list. And people in the significant disability or the non-significant disability categories do go onto the wait list. I think that we'll get to a point within the next few months, perhaps, that all of the people in priority group 2 or the significant disability category will come off, or will come off in less than a year after being on the list. But as long as we continue to see reductions in the state match, that means we see reductions in the federal match as well. So we've made a lot of progress, but we're not there yet. And we'll discuss those items in the public hearings. We certainly want to be able to be as transparent as is humanly possible about all of the information. I'll be moderating the hearings and answering all of the questions. So.
There are a few people who were trying to comment. I saw Commissioner Dunwell. Concha was asking if there are any questions for Karina.
Okay, seeing none, does anyone have any questions regarding Lisa Dignan's report? All right, moving on then to Deborah Romero. Any questions for her? Yes, John
Hey,
Hooper?
Commissioner Hooper here. I was looking at the TRS revenues. If you look at the first quarter of this year, like the 339,000, how does that compare with last year? I'm assuming it's probably a lot less. Is that correct?
Hello, this is Deborah. You're correct. It's about $100,000 less. We're continuing to see a decline in the TRS revenue.
This is Director Gum speaking. We have proposed during the Legislative Finance Committee hearing, we have given information to that committee that this needs to be addressed, and the tax and rev issue also needs to be addressed. And so we've sent in reports, we've sent in those numbers, we've shown them the continuous decline regardless of the change in language of the statute and how we collect. There is still an issue. So either we need a larger amount of money collected, or they are going to have to do a deep audit to determine where this money is being submitted to. The E911, the emergency 911 service, saw an increase in funding that correlates with the increase in funding that we anticipated seeing here. So with that, the question really is, where is the problem? And Senator Rodriguez is well aware of this issue and knows that it's something that urgently needs to be addressed. And in January, I know that the state in general is struggling financially with their resources. And we're seeing a 50% reduction in general funds. 5%, excuse me, not 50%. Hopefully not 50%. That would be horrible. But we are seeing a reduction in general funds, but we have already requested an increase in general funds for our deafblind, deaf plus, and deaf senior populations. So there is still more money potentially that we will have in comparison to what came in last year for at least those services. However, we don't have enough information to make really strong predictions at this time. So our financial predictions for New Mexico, we're just not sure how accurate those will be at this point. And I know there are a lot of people right now who are facing cuts in funding. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Deb. I believe with that, we're on to action items. Chair Dunwell, if you'd like to proceed.
Now we have the action item to accept the proposed OMA resolution. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
Has everyone read and reviewed the Open Meetings Act? Okay, seeing yes. Commissioner Vigil says yes. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Hooper, okay. So we need a motion to approve the OMA resolution. This is something that is done annually. Yes, Dr. Stern?
Is there a second?
All right, and we have a second from John Hooper, and our attorney here, Delilah Tenorio. I'd like to recognize her as well. Delilah.
Oh, good afternoon, Commissioners, Mr. Gome. So I just wanted to show you that I was available in case you have any questions regarding the changes that were made to the Open Meetings Act resolution. Essentially, the biggest change that was made, and for those of you that are new to the commission and weren't here back in May when we initially adopted this, if you look at both paragraphs 9 and 10, there was some language changes to that just to clarify that certain portions of the meetings may be closed to the public, and that's always done pursuant to the Open Meetings Act and the exceptions listed there. And then it just outlines the process of what happens when a meeting is going to be closed. The next change in language comes in paragraph 10 regarding meetings held during times of state of emergencies. And the change was just to clean up a little bit of that language and to make it a little bit more fluid and eliminate some of the redundancies in language that were there when this came to the commission the first time. Other than that, there were no real substantive changes, just sort of cleaning up the changes, cleaning up the language, and then doing some formatting changes. But again, it's the changes, even though they're not non-substantive, still need to be approved by the commission. And if you have any questions, particularly for those of you that are new to the commission about the resolution, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
This is Chair Dunwell. I'm wondering if the commission has needed to use this historically, or if there are any other options, or I'm just interested in why it is that we need to have this for our meetings.
Mr. Go.
This is Director Gum. Occasionally, there are situations where there may be a complaint being addressed that requires confidentiality. As well, there could be potential staff issues or evaluation of performances and discussion therein. So those discussions are important and they are confidential. So executive sessions, are not a place to take action, but they are a place for discussion of confidential information. And during virtual meetings, it does become a bit more complex on how you address that and still follow the Open Meetings Act resolution. And that's the reason that there is a part that has been added to ensure that we don't want to ignore the potential of having executive session.
This is Chair Dunwell. So basically, my understanding is that this gives us options if there is something that we need to take care of that comes up later, if there's a situation that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I'll defer to Delilah.
That's correct. And typically, if you look at, and the plan is for, because we have new commissioners that are have recently been appointed, we did do a training for the commission last summer regarding the Open Meetings Act, the Inspection of Public Records Act, and the particular statutes that govern this commission. Now with the appointment of new commissioners, Director Gome and I have been talking about doing a sort of a refresher course so that everybody is up to speed, and that will probably happen at the next commission meeting. But to piggyback on what Director Gome was saying about the executive session or closed session, as we sometimes call it, the Open Meetings Act itself does allow for that. There are exceptions that are listed there. The citation to the Open Meetings Act is in the resolution itself, so you can go and look at those, what the exceptions are. And typically the ones that pertain specifically to the commission are going to be the exception regarding threatened or pending litigation, personnel matters, and I believe there's one sort of catch-all under there. But those are the ones that this commission would utilize if you wanted to go into executive session. And typically that will sometimes happen. For example, if in regards to personnel matters, if you have to do an annual review of the executive director, or there is something that has come up with a staff member, maybe where disciplinary action is contemplated or is going to be taken, that it would be done in closed session so that the commission is aware of those kinds of things that are pending or being brought to the commission's attention. Finally, the Open Meetings Act is, because the commission is a state entity, it is required to comply with the provisions of the Open Meetings Act. And generally, the way that commissions or boards show their compliance is by adopting a resolution to say that we're aware that this exists, and sort of a way to put on paper that this commission is going to abide by what the Open Meetings Act says. And we're also going to, what also is part of this resolution that where there's no changes are regarding notice and when that notice of the meetings and when that's provided, how it's provided, and that kind of thing. So those are more, those types of issues aren't addressed in the Open Meetings Act. There's some broad language, but for this commission in particular, there is language that's added in there that says specifically for the commission how it's going to do that. So that's another reason this resolution comes to you on an annual basis. We brought it up a couple of times this year just because of the pandemic and changes that we've made for it regarding the virtual meetings and what needs to happen. But I think for, at least for right now and the remainder of this year and going into next year, this is the resolution that you will have. Again, when we go through the refresher training for existing commissioners and the training for new commissioners that have been recently appointed, you will get access, or you will get the Attorney General Compliance Guide for the Open Meetings Act and for the Inspection of Public Records Act. And I will provide you with the board statutes and rules so that you can have those available for your records. Thank you.
This is Chair Dunwell. Thank you very much, Delilah. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh yes, Dr. Stern.
Do we need a motion to accept? I move that we adopt the OMA as revised.
Do we have a second?
I will second it. Commissioner Hooper, second it.
Any further discussion? Ms. Neubauer, if you could please call a roll call vote.
Mrs. Concha Dunwell,
Aye.
Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Aye.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Francis Feehill,
Aye.
Dr. Ronald Stern,
Aye.
Mr. John Hooper.
Aye.
This is Commissioner Dunwell. The motion passes unanimously. Now to our next action item, we have the election of commissioners. So now I'd like to ask Vice Chair Vihill if you would take on that responsibility.
Director Gum, just to clarify, this is election of officers. So we're looking for the chair position. Mr. Vihill?
This is Commissioner Vehil. Do we have any nominations for the chair?
Right here. Does Commissioner Hooper like to nominate Commissioner Dunwell as the chair?
Ms. Dunwell, do you accept that nomination?
If there are any other nominations, that would also be fine, but I do accept.
Are there any other nominations for chair?
I see none.
If there are not any other nominations, do I hear a motion to select Ms. Dunwell as the board chair?
I would move to select Commissioner Dunwell as the chair.
And I will second it.
Okay, Ms. Newbauer, will you take a roll vote?
Mrs. Concha Dunwell. Dr.
Yes.
Rosemary Gallegos.
Yes.
Dr. Michael O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Francis Feehill.
Yes.
Dr. Ronald Stern.
Yes.
Mr. John Hooper.
Yes.
And this is Director Gum here. So that means that Ms. Dunwell will continue on another term as board chair, as decided by unanimous vote.
Thank you very much.
All right, Chair Dunwell, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. Next, we have the election for vice chair. Do we have a nomination? This is Chair Dunwell. I'd like to nominate Dr. O'Brien.
I will second it.
Dr. O'Brien, do you accept that nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll have Dr. O'Brien nominated. I would entertain a motion to elect Commissioner Dr. O'Brien as Vice Chair,
Mr. Hooper, I so move.
Ms. Neubauer, if you could please do a roll call vote.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, if we could get a second to the motion, for the motion.
Commissioner V. Hill says I second.
Okay, Mrs. Concha Dunwell,
Concha, she did call your name.
Oh, yes, I was asking Ms. Neubauer if she could begin the roll call vote.
Yes, she was actually calling your name, and you guys both did that at the same time.
Oh, I apologize for that. Yes, this
Not
is
at all.
Commissioner Dunwell. Aye.
Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Aye.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Aye.
Mr. Francis V. Hill,
Aye.
Dr. Ronald Stern,
Aye.
Mr. John Hooper,
Aye.
That passes unanimously. We now need nominations for secretary.
This is Commissioner Gallegos. I'd like to nominate Commissioner V. Hill for the position of secretary.
Commissioner V. Hill, do you accept this nomination?
I do.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we need a motion to accept Mr. V. Hill, Commissioner V. Hill, as secretary.
I, John Hooper, so move.
Mike O'Brien, I second.
And we do have a second. So now, Ms. Neubauer, if you could do an additional roll call vote.
Mrs. Concha Dunwell,
Yes.
Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Yes.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Francis V. Hill,
Yes.
Dr. Ronald Stern,
Yes.
Mr. John Hooper.
Yes.
The motion passes. Next, we need to discuss dates. Executive
Clarify
Director.
that motion did carry unanimously.
Thank you. Next, we do need to discuss dates for future board meetings for 2021. We usually have 4, I believe. Every 3 months.
Yes, every quarter, correct.
So we will need a date for March, June, September, and December. Are there any recommendations?
This is Director Gum speaking. I would recommend that we stay with the regular day of Thursday. And also keep the same time for these meetings. We typically do the second week of every month.
This is Mike O'Brien. I keep Thursday afternoons blocked out. That works best for me.
I agree. Commissioner Vigil agrees. This is Chair Dunwell. So for March, that means that it would be March 11th of 2021. So we're looking at March 11th. Would that be acceptable, commissioners?
Yes.
Commissioner Vigil says yes.
Yes.
All right, we're getting multiple yeses. Everyone agrees. For June, we're looking at June 10th. Is that
Yes.
acceptable? Everyone agrees. For September, that would be the 9th.
Yes.
September 9th. Wonderful. And finally, we would have December 9th as well.
Yes.
Seeing multiple yeses. That's acceptable to everyone? Wonderful. If there's no other business, I believe that's all that we have for today. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Hooper will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. A second? Commissioner Vigil seconds. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion. Ms. Neubauer, if you would please call a roll call vote for adjournment.
Sure. Mrs. Concha Dunwell,
Yes.
Dr. Rosemary Gallegos,
Yes.
Dr. Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Francis Vigil,
Yes.
Dr. Ronald Stern,
Yes.
Mr. John Hooper,
Yes.
All right, that's all that we have. That motion passes unanimously. The meeting is adjourned at 4:41. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you for joining us and being part of this meeting. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season and that things will be much improved in the new year. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.